Okay. We are back again with the 1455 interview series. We've got 2 down. We're rolling right into our 3rd one. And I'm probably going to say this about everyone I talk to, and it's going to be true, but there still are certain authors that I really look forward to talking to. Today, no exception. I always have a great time, and I know you're going to have a great time listening to Robert Anthony Siegel. He's a great writer and a great human being. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing how he addresses some of these questions. Let me introduce Robert, and then we'll get right into the questionnaire. Robert Anthony Siegel is the author of 2 novels and a memoir. The memoir entitled Criminals, My Family's Life on Both Sides of the Law, which, by the way, I interject and I say I've read, written about, and endorse highly. It's both a amusing, devastating, and brilliant memoir. So high recommendation from 1455. His work has appeared in the New York Times, the Smithsonian, the Paris Review, the Oxford American, and other venues. He teaches workshops at Catapult in New York City. His website is www.robertanthonysiegel.com. Robert, welcome. It's always a pleasure to have you, and you've always been you've continued to be a loyal friend to 1455, so we always want you part of any party we're having, and this is very much a literary party, so welcome.
Oh, well, thank you, Sean. I'm humbled. I mean, you are the world's best host and kindest and most generous.
Well, I appreciate that, but it's genuinely a pleasure when the company is as pleasant and brilliant as you. So without further ado, 14 minutes, 55 seconds. Let's go right off the bat. Robert, the first book that made you want to be a writer, or a book that changed your life?
The first book, I think it might actually be E.B. White's Stuart Little, which I read on my own when I was very small, but I think my mother read it to me even before then. And it just really, I remember it as a very sort of dark, beautiful, exciting, disturbing experience. And it just, I think because it captured the vulnerability of being small and venturing out into the world and not really knowing how the world worked. And it was just transformative in that way, that to understand that a book could capture that.
Awesome. How about, I know for all of us writers, this is impossible. Some of these questions are impossible. So there's not one answer, but one of the answers. Who is your most profound artistic influence, or one of them?
Most profound. So around that same period, my family lived in Manhattan, but we were from Brooklyn. I was born in Sheepshead Bay, and my father's side of the family still lived out there. And we would go out there really every weekend to see my grandmother. And on the way back, it would be very late, or I'd have the feeling that it was very late. So there was this incredible sense of glamour, this staying up late. It may have been 6 o'clock, I don't know, but it felt magical. And I remember watching the city out from the car window as we drove to the tunnel back to Manhattan. You're on this elevated highway, and I would look down and you could see sort of the Brooklyn waterfront and this factory building, one factory building in particular. I'm guessing that it made construction equipment, because on the roof there was an actual forklift with a mannequin in it. And I would look for that, and it would elicit, when I saw it in the dark, the mannequin was made out of plastic probably, because it would sort of glow white. It was riding that incredible machine, the forklift, and it was alone on this vast flat roof. And it just, these feelings, I knew that it wasn't real, that it wasn't really a man. But I felt also like it was real, and it was a man, and he lived on the roof. And those two opposing ideas would sort of resonate and feel very mysterious to me, a very lonely feeling. I think, so my family dynamics were sort of complicated, and I think these visits to my grandmother were sort of complicated and hard in many ways. So I would come back home carrying those feelings, and I associated them with the man on the roof and this feeling of loneliness. And I think about it all the time. I think it's a touchstone for me.
My only comment to that is that if there's one word I would use to describe the writing, and I've read a good amount of your writing, it's always soulful. And that is a very Siegel-esque response. So I'm so grateful that you share that with us. Not enough said. Is there an album or movie that right off the top of your head you recommend without reservation?
Yes. So I'm a movie lover. And one of the things, maybe the movie that launched my love of movies, again, back in childhood, I was already going to school. It must have been grade school. I was sick one day, and I remember it being in bed and bored, watching TV. And I saw It Happened One Night. That's Clark Gable, Claudette Colbert, um,
Vivian Lee? No?
No, I don't think so. The director was, hold on, I have notes somewhere. But it's this wonderful screwball comedy about Clark Gable plays a sort of this roguish newspaper man, right? Sort of a man of the people with a heart of gold, who is getting the story on a runaway heiress. That's Claudette Colbert, who's totally charming, right? And they, of course, fall in love. It became my idea of the writer as sort of a vagabond who can meet any situation, who can hop a train, is comfortable on a freight train and in a society ballroom. I have not lived up to that. I'm comfortable in neither place, probably in no place, but it was a wonderful ideal. And it was made right before the code, the obscenity code came in. So it has this wonderful sort of erotic or risque quality. It's perfectly clean, but it had this sort of erotic energy that was lost soon after. I think it was made in 1934. And here's the thing. I was sick for it felt like a week. It was probably 3 days. Mm-hmm. But the same movie was on every afternoon, and I just saw it over and over again.
That's wow. And I appreciate the old school throwback. All right, what about best first or last line in any book ever?
Very difficult.
Impossible. Yeah.
Yeah. But off the top of my head, the opening to 100 Years of Solitude, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, it circles around in this beautiful way. It connects with the ending. It seems totally planned. I have no idea how somebody could hold all of that in his mind, but I have it here. Many years later, as he faced the firing squad, Colonel Aureliano Buendia was to remember that distant afternoon when his father took him to discover ice. The first lie.
There's all that, you're in the presence of supernatural powers and abilities at that point.
And this frozen moment, waiting for death, and remembering what's really not just one's own life, but the life of one's clan. Your family through time. It's a model for, I think, what fiction can do.
Indeed. All right, my obligatory self-indulgent question: why have you not read Moby Dick? Or if you have, what classic do you regret not reading?
It's a tough one. See, the thing is, it's not that I haven't read Moby Dick. I have read, or rather, it's more exact to say I am always reading Moby Dick. I've just never started at the beginning. Mm-hmm. So I dip in, I read a little more, I put it down for a while, I think about it, then I go back. I've probably circled around about 10 times. It's it's a hugely profound, affecting book, but it's probably best not read straight through.
And I think I read a really good essay this summer making that case that it's meant to be digested in small bits. So great answer.
It's a snake swallowing its own tail.
Yes, or a sperm whale swallowing its own.
God knows what.
Yeah. Okay. Would you say that there's a single theme or issue that your work tries to address?
I feel like that's a fascinating question, and I would be a better writer and a happier person if I could answer it. But I don't have the distance, at least not yet. I don't have the psychological distance.
I'll say what I said earlier, and I'll say, the soulful sounds too cute by half, but you are a brilliant. I said this about your wife too, but it's true. You both are. There's a tremendous empathy that exudes from your work. And I know that's not a theme, but there's an honest and unflinching kind of look at really what makes people tick. And there's a concern about that observation that I think is very human and affecting.
Thank you, Sean.
That would be my take.
It's what I value in other writers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How about, do you have a writing routine, or do you believe in writing routines?
I do. I believe in them very strongly, and I have one, but it's always changing as external circumstances change, because I teach for a living, and I have 2 kids, and so stuff is always intervening. And for a while, I get writing first thing in the morning. At other times, I can't because there's some sort of scheduling issue. But I think routine is very important.
Okay. So what about writer's block? Do you believe in writer's block? Does it exist?
I would answer that from the side
Mm-hmm.
and say that there are all sorts of different kinds of things, both internal and external, that can keep you from writing. But they're many different things. They're not just one thing. So that labeling them writer's blocks, probably it conceals more than it reveals. It's far better to just say, what's stopping me now? Otherwise you're reifying the problem as giving it an objective reality it really shouldn't have. It's a small problem. Just something needs a little fix.
What an optimistic take. Beautiful. All right. So going from optimistic, I'm actually changing this on the fly because I've used the word failure, and I think it doesn't convey what I'm trying to get at. So the question did read, talk about the most significant failure, artistic or otherwise. I want to change that to setback. And the reason is, the idea of this question is to really convey to maybe younger writers in particular that very few writers have a smooth path from starting out writing to bestsellerdom and a career. There's a lot of failure and rejection, and that's also not what this is implying. But has there been a particular setback that you learned from, or that ironically propelled you to something, greater?
I want to answer this in a non-dark way. Yeah. If that's possible, I would say this, that often young writers, early writers, everyone, all the time, mid-career writers, old writers like me, we all do the same thing, which is that we confuse writing and publishing. In fact, the publishing world has nothing to do with writing. It's a mechanism which takes finished work and makes it available to readers as a commodity, really. It's necessary. It's a necessary mechanism, but it's not here to help you it's not inherently helpful. It's impersonal. And so it's very hard to navigate the publishing world, especially for, I think, a certain kind of personality, a certain kind of writer. We're all very vulnerable. Um, it's hard to make sense of how it works, or how to make it work for you. And I know that I've struggled with that, and in the same way that probably most writers have struggled with it. And that all you can do is struggle, you know, persevere, and keep your expectations low, and keep your sights um, on the main point, which is your writing life, not your publishing life. Make them somehow try to make the publishing life serve your writing life. That's the best I can do.
I love it. And I think that this might, on the heels of that, this might be a similar, you might explain this the same way, but how would you define or explain literary success and what that means to you?
So again, I try to keep my focus completely on the writing experience. There's nothing about publishing you can really control. So to hang the idea of success or failure on publishing, it's like hanging it on which way the wind blows. It's beyond your control. Instead, success has to be defined in terms of your own writing, your work. And everybody knows when they're writing well. You know, when you've created something that sings,
Yeah,
that's what you want to do.
So I reserve the right to always get the last question in because it's really a one sentence answer. Do you have a elevator pitch piece of advice for a young writer starting out?
Yes, absolutely. I think somehow when I started out, the act of writing, of becoming a writer, of connecting with the publishing world, it all seemed very fraught and very frightening. And I just tried to tell students that there's nothing to be scared about, and there's no reason to be frightened. If I could talk to my young self, I'd say, what's to be worried about? It's really a matter of just embracing life and embracing who you are and finding out what's going to happen. Nothing bad's going to happen. Just look inward, nurture your writing life, finish things and send them out because you want to share them. It's this urge to communicate.
Yes. Brilliant. Folks, I think you can see, if you don't already know Robert, why I always enjoy talking to him. And I hope that this conversation not only gives you some really interesting insights into what makes him tick, but makes you want to go out and explore his work. And if you need, why would you need further enticement? But you can go to the 1455 blog archives and see footage of Robert as one of our featured authors at our author events, reading from his memoir. You can see him talking about the memoir at last year's Lit Fest, and you can see his seminar from this year's Lit Fest. And all of that is to say that going forward, Robert also will be one of our authors that's going to be teaching workshops. We're going to be releasing that information and promoting it very soon, but stay tuned because you will have an opportunity to work directly with Robert and benefit from his tutelage in the very near future. So please stay tuned for that. Robert, thank you so much for being yourself and sharing some deep wisdom with us, always with kind of a smile, but also kind of an old wisdom of your soul. So,
well, thank you, Sean, and thank you for shepherding 1455, which is this tremendous project, and you do it brilliantly.
wow. Thank you, sir. It's a labor of love, and yeah, I look forward to continuing to build it. You know, the whole idea is it's by writers for writers, and we're really just trying to build something that all of us can feel good about and continue to lift each other up and provide that feedback and support because we're all, you know, desperately in need of it, especially these days.
Yeah. How often do you see that in this world?
Right. Indeed. So onward and upward. And I'm certain we'll be speaking to you again soon. So thanks, and to be continued as always.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sean.
All right, Robert.